We have a long way to go fighting for social justice and acceptance in this country, but I want to thank everyone here for being the empowered people that you are. As we've seen in recent events, history continues to repeat itself, but every time we challenge those who stand against equality, like those at Stonewall did, we learn how to take them down and stand together while building ourselves up. So.
I have a load of announcements, but I couldn't help, watching this. I was really glad to watch it this week of all weeks. The only thing I regret is that we had our sign making party before seeing this movie. I have a lot of great ideas here. In a lot of ways, we're laughing about some of the things that had changed so much, but yet there were a lot of things that really, truly rang true and showed how important the work we do as activists, as people who constantly are the thorn in the side of those who want to take away other people's rights are, and also the importance of, I think one of the things that, has changed significantly in the LGBT movement, besides the name LGBT, is that there isn't that, I think we're stronger and hold together much more than we used to. We recognize that the rights of people of color, that trans rights are important, that women should be at the forefront of their struggle and have a place, and that it's a working class movement as well, and that has real implications. So I'm pretty proud to be in this room right now. So I can just take a stack, so anyone can raise their hand at any time if you got something to say about the movie or what you thought or what you.
I was just going to like what Joe was saying was very real. It's like no surprise, right, that San Francisco is one of the only counties in, I think besides Humboldt, but one of the only counties in California right now that, even though the Bay Area is definitely getting screwed by like local and federal government, right? San Francisco, I don't know, has anyone been to the Castro? There's like dispensaries all over the place, and something Joey always talks about is like all this divisiveness that we saw in the movie. Something that he said to me, and that it really stuck with me, is when white middle class gay men were pushing women out, and the HIV/AIDS virus started affecting people, and the gay men needed people to run their storefronts in San Francisco. They called them the lesbians, and it was like the first time to have this like real intense integration where the community was really depending on each other, kind of like how they showed from a campaign happening, the first like huge anti-gay campaign, and they all came together. And it was the same with the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and it continues to be that way. So it really definitely is an LGBT issue. And the statistics real; it's over 60%.
Yeah.
Of people with HIV/AIDS use medical cannabis. So if that's something you care about, it's really, really important to get people power to the meeting tomorrow in Imperial Beach. If you can't come at 6, it's going to be on at 8 o'clock, like our agenda item. It's our last chance to get them to choose to let us vote, or let IB residents vote, or it's going to be moved to 2014. So there's not really a chance after tomorrow night.
Yeah, just on the medical cannabis issue, I just want to add really briefly, I was going to make a different point, but this is also a social justice issue for people of color, because the people who are targeted by law enforcement to be criminalized for the possession, use, and sale or exchange of drugs is overwhelmingly black and brown people. So it's a major social justice issue for as a racial issue as well. The point I was going to say that this film was better than I could have ever expected. It was really, really good. I wish more people would see it. I'm glad it's a PBS special because it probably makes it hopefully accessible to people. It was really inspiring. It makes me want to bring back, like, actually, in the last 4 years as an LGBT activist, I sort of get tired of people saying, let's bring back the spirit of Stonewall, because sometimes I feel like it's just a cliche, but after seeing this, I'm like, yeah, let's bring back the spirit of Stonewall. For anybody who's in this room who hasn't heard about SAME, San Diego Alliance for Marriage Equality, or about our Pride contingent, I just want to spend a second talking about that a little bit. We've been sort of the left-wing, radical, end of the movement since 2008 when Prop 8 passed. We formed just a few weeks after that, and we've been meeting, every other Tuesday ever since. Everybody is welcome. If you want to know where to meet, just talk to one of us afterwards. But this year, I think that we're really, really proud and happy that Campus for a Cause is partnering with us, because it's the other radical movement in town for LGBT rights. And I'm convinced that we're going to be the only really, okay, I'll wrap up, the only really progressive and radical sort of contingent in Pride this year, because the theme is America's Pride, which makes me want to bark in my mouth. And I really do think that it's, we should be an international and an internationalist movement. And our theme is join the struggle, not the wars, and our signs say no hate, no borders, no love is illegal, no human is illegal, and the drug war, stop police brutality. So if that's something that is meaningful to you, then please join us, march with us, and bring your friends, and bring your protest signs and what you have to say, and it's going to be awesome.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone, my name is Holly. I guess I just wanted to throw this out and see if anyone else was gonna follow up with it afterwards. But I think you're right, Zakia, in saying that we've definitely come a long ways in recognizing these ways which schisms were created in the original foundings, based on race, class, gender, things like that. But I guess I just wanted to say I think those still exist in a lot of ways, and a lot of what they were talking about with everything that's happened with Occupy in different cities right now was so reminiscent of what exactly happened at Occupy, where people would come to this space that was supposed to be open, and they would be like, let me talk about this issue that's directly affecting me, and maybe it has to do with race, maybe it has to do with class, maybe it has to be with your Filipina, and you still see the colonization of your land to this day, you know what I mean? And they were, oh, that's not the issue we're talking about. We're only talking about money in politics and economic disparity. And it was what are you talking about? These aren't different issues. And it was just so similar to see that when they were talking about the GAA and how it was supposed to be this one issue. And I heard that so many times in Occupy, and was the one that was like, no, screw you, this isn't a one issue thing. That's why there's so many people here. So I just think it's we've definitely come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. And I think we still see those similarities even in a lot of so-called progressive movements. So just keeping that in mind, and I would love to hear if anyone has thoughts on how we can continue to break those molds.
Yeah, I just wanted to review one of the quotes that was just sort of thrown as an aside by one of the people in the movie, and it was one of the women who said something about we're gays and lesbians, and we better stick together because we'll always be gays and lesbians. And in my mind, I was thinking, okay, well, let's hold hands on one side, but we have to remember to keep one hand open for people who are not gays and lesbians, because one of the things that I think we will need to do, and it seemed like they did it a little bit in the early 70s, is they had some interaction with the Black Panthers, they had some interaction with labor, brown power, and I guess I just want to finish by saying I encourage you, if you are passionate about LGBT rights, is to think about, to broaden your definition of what the person or the people that you're protecting are, and consider what other groups are also fighting for persons' rights, and who we can grab onto on one side and the other side with our free hand.
So I just thought it was, and I'm going to stand so people can see me because I'm really short. I just wanted to say that as far as discussion on the movie, I thought it was really, really uplifting, especially to see that I think it always is the case whenever you look into places, but that young radical kids, I think every time I've seen a video that went over how this rebellion got started, it's always oh, they were just kids, it was just a bunch of kids that were there, you know what I mean? I think that's really awesome. Also, just when Sylvia Rivera was up there talking, holy crap, I almost cried. It was insane. But I thought that the point she made sounded so prevalent now that it was still funny. It was still interesting to especially now that I am openly trans and a person of color, those things still exist. And in the vein of what Holly said, that if we're gonna be keeping in our minds what things we need to stop so we can have more people in the movement, I definitely think making things more trans friendly and less gendered, and not only that, but remembering the houseless people and the street kids as they call them, because I think that that's the first thing that capitalism teaches you to do, to break us apart is to like separate ourselves in classes, and no matter what class we all fall under, and like we might have to fight people on top of us, everybody drops the houseless people first. And we're like, no matter who you are, I'm sure we've all participated in making their lives way harder, and especially in the activist community, they're the first people who are like, okay, let's let them finish so that, you know, they've given their free speech, but let's not listen to anything they're saying. You know what I mean? So I think that that's definitely one of the things that we need to think about moving forward, that we still can work, that need to work on, that was happening back then.
I agreed with both what Holly and Zakia said, and I have an observation that kind of makes a distinction between it. I think on the, you know, they were talking about how there were kind of two types of structures. There were people who were all solidarity, trying to fight for everything. There were people who were just the one issue and didn't notice like the overlapping gaps. I think structurally we have gotten a lot better. I mean, you have things like, you have groups that have the focus and also do solidarity, and you have the groups that are for solidarity, but they also have the focus. And so you'll have something like, you'll have somebody who organizes Pride, which is just gay, but then anybody can have a contingent, and then you see diversity within it, you know, by us being there. And so then I think structurally you have like, you know, things like the Human Rights Campaign will have, like, will make sure they have like a trans contingent, they have different sections in their group, and then people will make sure that they have trans speakers or people of color speakers, and they'll be, I think people structurally try to do that a lot better. But then on the personal opinion level, I think we have a lot to work on. I mean, I was just in Berkeley this last semester, and somebody was like talking about gay rights and I was in a group of white lesbians, and then somebody was like, oh, but we need to work on people of color rights. And there's one girl who was like, oh, right, there are queer people of color. And he like literally had this moment of like, oh yeah, I forget about that, because they never saw that in like in all the circles they go to. And so it's, I think on the personal level, then I completely agree with Holly, but on the structural level, I completely agree with Zakia, that it's, we've made a lot of progress, but it's, you need to keep doing it in order to get there.
Too, because I actually want to read something. My name is Phyllis, and I'm new to, hi, I'm new to this, and the reason that I'm here is simply because I'm a mom, I have kids, I care about what kind of world they're going to grow up in. And what was most interesting to me about this movie is that it totally solidified everything about why I'm here. And a quote popped into my head, and I looked it up so that I could read it to you, because I think this totally sums it up. First, they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. And that's the bottom line. That's the lesson I want my kids to hear. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm going to be there Saturday. And that's the lesson.
Well, I just started thinking on Shelby outside, and the thing that stood out to me the most was African American lesbian. I assume she was a lesbian because it was all lesbians in the film. When she was talking about how suddenly there was a struggle that was affecting white middle class men, and how they were saying like, you know, it was the struggle to join because it was affecting them. And two things like came to my head, that's something like we deal with so heavily now, with not just like gay men, you know, obviously they were talking about gay middle class white men, and that happens here in San Diego, right? That happens in like a lot of like more conservative counties and conservative cities. It's, people will say like, oh, well there's like all these gay people in politics, and they'll realize like, well there's no trans people in politics, and there's one woman lesbian in politics, and there's like two male people of color that are gay in politics. So it's really not really spread out across the board. And the other thing that popped into my head was like Occupy San Diego, and Occupy in general, and how it was like, how hard we had to work to like teach people that it's like the same struggle, that like we were bringing this different agenda, and it was like so tiring and so frustrating. And it's like, well, we were just saying outside, it's like, no, we're not like, you know, co-opting your protest. We had our own protest. We're just relocating it so we can do it together.
Right.
And it really pisses me off because the people who would know how to organize the best are the people who have been oppressed for the longest amount of time and been fighting it. So women, people of color, trans people, you know, it is so crazy that gay middle-class men didn't realize who could help them the most, and still white middle-class men push other groups away so often. And I'm not saying everybody, but it's definitely something we see. So it's like, where do you think you can learn from? Who's been doing this? How did women get the right to vote? You didn't make it happen, you know?
Yeah, so I might be preaching to the choir here, like, which is an important thing, because the choir needs to say. So I mean, one of the obvious points from the Stonewall riots is what side the police fall on.
Right.
And I think that we need to remember that that's the side they're still on, is to protect private property. It is not to protect our rights, and legally it's not to serve and protect. It's been litigated. They have no duty to actually protect us. Won't get into that. So, I don't know if anybody here has ever volunteered with the Stonewall Citizens Patrol, and hopefully they're not operating the same way, because I've had a couple of volunteers tell me that they actually call the police on people who are committing non-violent crimes or who they suspect of it. That is not something that should be happening in our name.
Right.
This is, you know, we need to stick together. We need to protect people against the police. You know, the Committee Against Police Brutality is kind of restarting in San Diego, and we're really happy to be marching in this contingent. I mean, it's completely relevant with an event that comes out of, you know, a 5-day riot fighting against incredible police violence. I mean, the police are still at it in San Diego. They are out of control. Won't go into it, but we need to really band together and protect each other from them, and not tolerate people becoming basically informants.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys are safe with St. Alex for Marriage Equality, everybody here. So, time myself. Real quickly, seeing this film, you know, coming in late was very, very inspiring to see. It reminded me of what I saw at another meeting that we all had, sponsored by SAME and others, with the Gay Liberation Front people. They said that the Black Panthers told them that what they were doing was more revolutionary than the Panthers to them, to Gay Liberation vote, because if you wanted to pass, you could pass, but you chose not to. You chose to put yourself out there as a gay person. So they said, you're doing it more revolutionary than we do, so they tipped their hat. Second thing, what a difference all this struggle makes for what it's worth. As far as nation states in this world, Johanna Sigurðardóttir is the world's first LGBT anyone, happens to be a lesbian, is now the head of state of Iceland. The president of Iceland, open lesbian, and that state put their bankers in jail who were doing the same thing with the bankers in here. Just so you know as well. So good on Sigurðardóttir, and good on everybody here in the street as well. Done.
This was a really great film, and I kind of lived through some of it, and I missed some of it, but I was around. And I knew some of these people, or I read their books or whatever. There was a couple of little things that seemed missing from my memory of history. One is that they were saying that there was this kind of lull after like the early 70s, and there wasn't a whole lot of action, and then Anita Bryant happened, and there was a big upsurge. Well, the reality was that was true for the gay men. It wasn't true for women and lesbians, because there was an upsurge in feminist struggle all through the 70s. And so when the Anita Bryant stuff hit, the women were in the lead. And they were very well organized in a way that we are not today, and we should recognize that in some ways we've gone backwards in that sense. So women and lesbian feminists were very well organized and took the lead. And in fact, it might have been that demonstration in '77 that me and my ex painted this big banner, and because we were fighting about the banner, we had two different sides of the banner. One side, women's contingent, the other side, women's contingent. So we had one big banner that said, women's contingent, and there was a film somewhere, God knows, I wish I had it, that chose that banner. But anyway, I mean, the point was that, when anybody does any kind of history like that, sometimes they can miss some other things. The other implication, which I thought was inaccurate, was that the police brutality had kind of eased off, and it wasn't any big deal, toward the in the 70s. Not true in San Francisco. They were beating up people in the bars. I mean, the Elephant Walk was attacked. I mean, there was all this stuff going on, and so it didn't really let up very much.
Okay.
Thanks for sharing. So Mariah, then Tracy.
Well, I'm glad you spoke up, because I was going to ask for the somewhat short, small numbers that we have here of people that were around in the 70s and 80s that I would like comments, just of your experiences, and you talk about it, because I think that's really important for those of us that were either too young to remember or weren't in the movements, or that's why we're watching this film, is it's important to know our history. And so having that personal sharing, if anyone wants to. And then also the hugs. I just loved that part where she was talking about that she just kept hugging her to say, like, look, we're just here together for this same fight, and it's not about sex. Because it's so often like, oh, you're homosexual, you're LGBT or anything, you must always want somebody who is, that as well. And, it's not true. Maybe you just want to hug somebody because they're another kind human being fighting alongside you. So.
I'm going to take the person about the blue shirt, and then the person with the glasses is going to go ahead.
Well, I just want to say I'm really proud of the young people doing this. I was 22 in 1977. I remember protesting Anita Bryant. I worked in the only lesbian bar then, Diablo's. The men and the women did not get along at all. They did not want us in their bars. And I remember 1977, I think it was the second year of parade, or march. It's 50 of us marching. We had things thrown at us. Mostly food. But it was nice. I mean, we were trying back then. And it was, to some of us, one issue, but the groups were split back then, and it's really good to see the difference from back then to what it is now. You stayed in your own bars. I mean, it really was a class and gender separation back then.
In the back.
Hi, I'm Dawn, and about the same age in 77, and I was trying to think of what I could contribute, being a very active anti-war protester at the time. And I would just like to remind us of how much that was a distraction from the real social issues that needed to be done. I mean, it was just like, hey, everybody, look over here, and of course, it was like this manufactured distraction. And there were all these social issues that really needed to be taken care of. And it was hard for us, it brought us together in causes, but also it was just like, oh, well, the war. What about our social infrastructure? What about home? What about our own issues? So that's what occurred to me, is we have the same thing going on. There's a sadness, seeing, man, 40 years later, I mean, I am glad, and I have said to our group, thank you for being here. But it's kind of sad to see the same stuff going on, and yet we haven't quit. We haven't given up. People have come along and picked up the baton and said, yeah, I want that. Oh, you guys already did that? Well, why didn't that stick? Well, let's do it again. So I'm glad for that. But the United States, the war, big distraction from what we needed to do in our own backyard.
Jersey, then Sean.
Yeah, I forgot to add something to what I was saying last time. I'm so happy to hear people speak that were actually there, because it's like so much more informative than the actual film. So two things. Something else when she was clarifying about things, obviously I wasn't there, but something that I felt I need to clarify. In not a romanticizing way, the Black Panthers Party was like phenomenal, right? Like the organizing they were able to accomplish when they were being so oppressed and being like literally killed by police, but they were still able to accomplish so much. So it's something and there was, you know, sexism, and there was homophobia and transphobia, but they did come out with a statement later. Who here has read like the 10, what do they call it, like the 10, they're almost like the Black Panther's commandments, but I don't know what they're, I can't remember the actual language. The 10-point program, yeah. And they came out with a new version of that, which included he and she. They used to only say he, and it wasn't that much later than all of this. And they came out in full support of lesbian and gay people, saying that, you know, huge statements about like lesbian and gay people shouldn't be oppressed, and were really public about it. So that did change, and the movie didn't cover that. Damn, there was one other thing. Oh, I don't remember, but I did want to leave on like, I can't imagine a group of such amazing organizers like the Black Panthers Party, even if they're like, and they come wanting to combine, and the like stuck up gays are like, oh no, we don't want to be associated with that. I mean, things would have went so much faster for us if we taught them like, hey, let me tell you why you can't say faggot, right? Like, geez, if we could have just done like a teach-in. And the other thing with history repeating itself, it's so exciting to know like LGBT people will be in history now, because so many of our mistakes that are repeated, and this is something we were talking about outside, they're repeated because we've never learned them. And things like this film are like the first times a lot of us see things like this. We have to go out of our way to learn how LGBT people got rights, right? So the more we're taught this in like the public school system and the school system in general, like our kids are taught it and our friends' kids are taught it, you know, organizing groups will know what messed up and what to do different next time. So that's a good like 10 years ahead of us, but I think good things will come from including LGBT, civil rights. This was played, I mean, it won't be this extreme, obviously, I wish, but if this was played in the history class, like, can you imagine you heard this stuff when you were 15? You know, you'd be organizing 2 weeks later.
So glad that our banner, or our theme is join the struggle first, you know, not the war, and so many people have touched on this, but that it is a struggle, that it's always a struggle, that we need to take solace in victories as they come, and not just, you know, look at all of the bad things that still exist, because certainly they do, but we need to be motivated to be in the struggle and to stay in the struggle, and that as we join in solidarity internationally with all oppressed people, that it's their struggle too, and the struggle is never over. But that's okay, because we have each other, and we have the feelings of this that are in this room right now, and that we can come together and we can find that solace in each other and in the progress that we make, though slowly, because think about if they hadn't done that, you know, and think about how much farther behind we would be, and it's just a struggle, but it's a struggle that lives on, and it's a struggle that has to be fought, and I think all of us would be less if we weren't here, obviously, and if they weren't there, and so that is what it is a struggle, and I don't know, I'm saying this as a full-time activist, I don't know what the light at the end of the tunnel is, but I know that as we engage, that is the solution, engaging the struggle. So I'm really glad that that's
I think start out with a shout out for Canvas for a Cause, because when I first went to Occupy last fall, I was a little scared about being there and being out as a gay guy, and I was an occasional attendant, and I know that there was a time when CFAC did teach-ins on LGBT, you know, essentially awareness, and it really changed. And one, I thank CFAC for doing that, and with some help from other people. But two, I also want to point out that to me, it seemed like Occupy, the movement or the people, responded, and that when you point out that you're together in struggle and make the case, people will recognize it. And so I just wanted to point out those two things, because I also think that, you know, what we need to be doing is reaching out outside of whatever we consider our community to be.
That leads really well into what I was going to say. I was going to make 2 points. One is about the importance of movement. I mean, I, was never out as a bisexual person except for, to a very small number of individuals who I trusted, but, out to just anybody I would meet, until this movement that we're in right now that I feel started in 2008. And it's because I was a part of a community of LGBT people fighting for liberation that I felt safe and comfortable and confident coming out. And the reason why that's so important in making people safer is not just individually do I feel safer, but the bigger our movement grows, the more people we show how big and powerful we are, the more other people on our fringe become safe to then come out, and it just, becomes exponential. And that is why LGBT people are less oppressed now than we were in 1969, although obviously we still have a long way to go. Sorry? Oh. My second point was actually on exactly what Jersey just mentioned, which is I wanted to make a point about what I think is a very important sort of basis for, or the roots of transphobia, which is sexism. And the reason I want to make this point is that I took a look at myself. For example, I'm a receptionist at a company. I work at the front desk. The expectation of me is that I present in a feminine manner. That is what is expected. And in fact, when I have a friend who's a recruiter at a temping agency, and when people call for receptionists, they say, we want the next girl to be like this, we want the next girl to, they don't say we want the next person, they want a girl for the receptionist for the front. And why are trans people homeless? They're homeless because it's very difficult to get a job if you're transgender, and the reason it's so difficult to get a job is because you're not conforming with what is expected of you as a sexual male or sexual female. And so what we need to do is completely tear apart gender stereotypes and expectations of what it means to be a man or woman. And I just want to recommend a book by Martin Duberman called Stonewall, where he gets into the individual stories of 6 people, and one of the people that he biographizes through interviews is Sylvia Rivera. She's a very interesting character, and at one point there's a quote I really love by her where she said, she didn't identify as a woman, she identified as a queen, as a she, but as a sexual male, and said, it's not that I want to be a woman, I just want to have the same right to be fabulous as anybody else. And I thought that was beautiful and a really great expression of what true liberation would mean for us.
Yeah, something that Cecile said made me want to speak a little bit about what we do as Canvas for a Cause. And I don't know why I was so nervous in the beginning. I was all sweaty and gross. I'm in the midst of family, right? So,
You always look good.
thanks. So, we all, I'm sure if we identify as LGBT, we all have our own coming out stories, right? So, personally, I came out at 13 in Poway.
Wow.
Yeah. So, the reason, this is so important. This is so important. I am here because of them. I am me and where I am at because of them, right? Without that, I wouldn't be here. I didn't know about that when I was 13 in Poway, right? We're, as Canvas for a Cause, we're out there every day saying gay to thousands of people, right? And telling them why it's so important to keep these people into history books. It has reduced bullying rates drastically. Massachusetts, it dropped by 95% in 5 years by including these people in history books, right? We are a family, regardless of our age, race, sexual identity, gender identity. It doesn't fucking matter. The bigger we are the 99%, right? We are. It doesn't matter. So, the bigger we are, the more presence that we have, and the safer that those people who are coming up behind us feel to be themselves and discover who they are, right? So, yeah, I just wanted to say that.
I was gonna say a lot, but I would just boil it down to power concedes nothing without a fight. And we can't ever. I think what sort of we're trying to sort of make a statement against in this year's Pride is that our work isn't over. We may have made some gains, but by no means can we expect that it will all magically happen just because one good thing happened doesn't mean that the next thing will happen automatically. We actually have to work for it. And then, so Mariah, it looks like it'll be our last speaker.
Well, that's a nice segue. Because I actually am reminded, because of Sam, that it is still a march. It is still a march. Whether they call it a parade or not, it's still a march because in one of the many LGBT films that are out there about history and about the current struggle, there was somebody saying that they will always call it a march until every LGBT person has rights, you know, around the world. Because internationally, like there's some really atrocious things happening. I'm sure you've heard many stories. So as far as I'm concerned, it's always a march. So when I talk about it, I may say the parade, but I'm going to say we're going to march in the Pride Parade. Along those lines, also the films. Some of you were here in December when we saw the film about Bayard Rustin. For those who are not, we have it if you want to borrow it. Watch it with friends, show it again. For those who don't know, he was a gay black man during the civil rights. And he was right there side by side with Martin Luther King Jr. So very interesting story that we do not know, and hopefully will now have an opportunity to teach some of our youth in the schools, and perhaps other people that we've not heard of. So here at the Peace Resource Center, we have a lending library, we have DVDs such as that, and we are constantly adding to it. So if you have suggestions, we can get it, and then you can either show it with your organizations or just borrow it for friends. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for the library.